This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Hi guys, I'm Carl Gruber, author of the new book True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship. Are you tired of being caught in the web of negativity that our ego-driven world mandates as reality? Say one positive thing and all you hear is, get real, get your head out of the clouds and prepare for the worst. Well, I'm here to tell you that negativity is not reality, and that the opposite is true. This is why I have written and published this book. In my new book, I show you how you can walk hand in hand and in alignment with the law of attraction and eternal universal spiritual truths, which will allow you to make all the positive, loving, happy, abundant, and healthy things you desire your reality. Find out how you can become a consistent co-creator of your life with the universe and get out of that negative spiral of lack, attack, and judgment. Get your copy today of my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship by Carl Gruber, now available as an ebook and paperback on Amazon. Hey, welcome once again to the show World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment. I'm your host, Carl Gruber. Now, since June 2018, I have been exploring all the many different realms and aspects of spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment. But as a dedicated student of the modern spiritual guide, A Course in Miracles, for the last 20 years, the non-dualistic spiritual teachings of the A.C.I.M is the core and rock-solid foundation of this show, and that will never change. So with this show, episode number 170, we continue on that path to true enlightenment and our awakening back home to our true reality with our source, with God. With this in mind, let us now meet our featured guest on today's show. So one of the great things about this show is that it allows me to access and talk one-on-one with some of the world's greatest teachers of the A.C.I.M, like Gary Renard, Dr. John Mundy, David Hoffmeister, David Fishman, Cindy Laura Renard, Jennifer Hadley, Dr. Bob Rosenthal, Corinne Zupko, and on and on and on. So, with today's show, we add to this list of beautiful purveyors of love, light, and forgiveness with Reverend Myron Jones. Myron is an ordained minister through the pathways of light and a student of A Course in Miracles for 40 years and a respected speaker and a teacher in the A.C.I.M community. So, welcome, Myron. I'm so glad to finally get you on the show. I love what you do and teach, as so all of us A.C.I.M students do, so welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Carl. I'm so happy to be here.
Like I said, I think we're going to have a great conversation. You know, this is, like I said, the core of this podcast, the teachings of A Course in Miracles. What I would like to find out, let's start from the beginning of Myron Jones' life. What was the long and winding path of your young life and experiences that eventually led you to become a certified minister and a teacher of A Course in Miracles?
Oh, well, I'm 75 years old, so I was very active during the 70s, and life was kind of crazy. So lots and lots of things to look at and forgive and see differently. But somewhere along that path, around 81, I think, was whenever I found A Course in Miracles. And I had joined a unity study group. We didn't have a church, but we did have a study group. And so I got introduced to the course, and I just never looked back. I don't know, there was just something about it. I think perhaps it was kind of interesting because maybe a couple of months before that, I had gotten this, I kept hearing Holy Spirit in my mind. And I was raised Catholic, and like the only time that ever came up for me was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, so I didn't know what that was about. And so I kept going to churches trying to figure out, well, why am I hearing this? And I never could find anything that appealed. So I just let it go. And I think maybe the whole purpose of that was so that when I went to hear this woman talk about A Course in Miracles, I heard Holy Spirit, and it clicked. Because afterwards I knew I absolutely had to have the book, but I didn't know why, because I didn't think she said anything that was so meaningful. But I studied on my own, basically. I had our Unity Center had a study group, and then I moved away, and so I was studying on my own for probably the first 10 years. And that was very slow going because, at that time we didn't have computers in our homes. And there weren't as many teachers. In fact, there were very, very few teachers of the course, and I didn't know who they were anyway. So that was a hard way to do it. I'm glad, that now we have so many wonderful teachers of the course and so much information available to us. But about 97 or 8, somewhere along in there, I started having the feeling that that it was time for something to change. And I had this thought, what have I ever done that has had a lot of meaning for me? And the only thing it was A Course in Miracles. And so I said to myself, what I need is structure, because I had not studied anything other than just, off and on with the course in a long time. It had been a long time since I've been to school or whatever. So I said, I just need some structure. I think that would help. And about the same time, my brother called me and said, hey, they got computers on sale. You ought to go get you one. And I never had a computer, never been on a computer. I heard people talk about the internet, had no idea what the internet was. But I went and got the computer, and I said, well, what am I going to do? So I thought, I wonder if people are still studying the course. And that's how isolated I was in my study. And of course, there was just so much that came back from that. The first place it took me to was a forum, and everybody was arguing about what it meant. And I went, gosh, that's not what the course says to do, so I got out of there. The second place I went to was Pathways of Light, and there was such a contrast. Everything they teach is A Course in Miracles, and it's all about going within and getting your own answers. It's very gentle, very loving. And I thought, oh, this is more like it. And then I saw they had courses, and I thought, oh, wow, that's what I wanted. See, I didn't even know that I was asking Holy Spirit to bring me what I need. I mean, it's just like, so I was surprised at that point. And so I signed up for a course, and then I liked that a lot. It was a lot of inner work. And so I signed up for a second one. And then I started getting brave and looking at their very big website. And I said, oh, if I keep doing these, I'll be a minister. And I just thought my mind was like, what? You're going to be a minister? And this is the deep South. This where I am in Louisiana. This is a very, very deep into the Bible Belt. And I didn't even know a female minister, so I was just like, I don't see how this is going to work. But there was something in me that was just like, yes. And so no matter how much the ego talked in my mind about how I couldn't do this and I shouldn't do this, that yes would not go away. So that's how I wound up with Pathways of Light. And it was perfect, as is everything. Nothing's at random. Everything is planned for us very carefully. Because I was getting a divorce about maybe a year or so into Pathways. the ministerial courses usually take about a year. It took me 3 years. I was working full time, and it was just I was slow going. About a year into it, I got a divorce, and of course, the courses I took through them was like my therapy. It was my therapy, and it got me through it. And I wound up having wonderful miracles that came through that divorce, actually. And so, anyway, so that's how I got into it.
Wow, that's a pretty good story. You know, the fact that you got a computer in '96 and you got interested in the A.C.I.M. Them. The internet was only just in its infancy in '95, '96. It was a very beginning. It was very slow loading, and they used to have forums and chats. You don't really see those. I mean, you kind of see chat on Facebook these days, but
Well,
very.
it might have, I might be wrong about the year. Maybe it was closer to 99. I don't know. But anyway, it was somewhere around there in the late 90s.
All right, yeah, you and I both kind of grew up in the same time. We're launched from the hippie era into
Yeah.
this. Well, you know, that's interesting. You know, many people, many of my guests who I talked to grew up in a Catholic household. They got it shoved down their throat, and it caused them lots of trauma emotionally and mentally for, you know, developing restricting paradigms for lifetime. So good for you for getting out of that. I do have a question about this. When you started getting into the A.C.I.M, A Course in Miracles, did you receive any initial pushback or doubt from your family and friends when you first started to live and practice the teachings of the A.C.I.M?
No, my family's they're very supportive. None of them do it, are interested in it in the least. My oldest girl is, uh, she's atheist and completely not like just too lazy to be anything else. She's seriously an atheist. But and I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. They're all grown, of course. But they were all very supportive of me doing whatever I want to do. So that was good.
Well, that's interesting. You know, your daughter's an atheist. I think, you know, everybody comes to their path and their path to enlightenment, maybe in this lifetime, maybe in a lifetime, another lifetime. So it's good that you didn't shove it down her throat too, you know, and let her make her own judgments. Who knows? Maybe in a few years she might have a little awakening to it, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
whatever her path is. So that's excellent. Now, one thing that I find curious because you know your website, you're Reverend Myron Jones, and a certified Reverend in Pathways of Light for A Course in Miracles. Do people sometimes confuse you with being a Reverend of organized religion because they hear the word, the title Reverend?
I suppose that's probably true. It doesn't come up for me a lot. As soon as I was ordained, the very first I got home, like from the ordination, and the very next day, I ran into 2 people who attended a local church that I had been to one time, like months earlier, and they asked me what I was doing, and I told them, well, I was just ordained, and so they asked me to come and work at their church as a part-time minister. And I did that for about a year, and it's like that was like Holy Spirit throwing me into it before I got a chance to get scared and back out of it. So that's the only time. And I think that most of the people that I came in contact with knew me and knew that it was that I'm was not into organized religion. So maybe people did. I don't.
Well, that's interesting. So you were a part-time minister at this church. Was it a unity church, or if it was most organized religion churches are not necessarily open to non-dualistic spiritual teachings?
Yeah, this was an unusual church. It was a Church of the Brethren, which every Church of the Brethren is a little different, I understand, but this particular one, it was a very open-minded church. It's the only reason I went ever, and the only reason I would consider, doing anything there. But they were very open-minded. They were ready to in fact, I had a Course in Miracles group there. And yeah, I enjoyed it. while it lasted, but I was working full time. I was beginning to take on students and people who were asking for counseling and church, and it was just too much. And so I said, well, something's got to go. And I decided that my least favorite was working in a church. I preferred the one-on-one working with people.
Yeah, very good.
I still do.
So, this is kind of a big ask here, but most of my listeners understand about A Course in Miracles, but I always come from the aspect that there's somebody new, maybe never heard about it even before. For anyone who is new to A Course in Miracles, can you briefly tell them what it is?
Well, that's always a hard question, to get a book that big down to a paragraph. But it's a channeled book, came from Jesus through to I think they were psychology professors, and so it's in a form of psychology. Actually, it would be not like Christian, but spiritual psychology. But the whole purpose is to bring us from fear to love, bring us always from fear to love. And that was what appealed to me, was that. And then there's a metaphysical aspect to it that I found very appealing. I had no idea why, I just did, and which I like very much. And it's based on the idea that we're in a dream, that the world is not reality, in the sense that what God creates is eternal and changeless, and obviously the world is not. And so I think of it, and many people do, as it's just a dream. It's like we're having a dream of being separate from God, which we cannot be. And so that's why it's hard to do this in a paragraph, because it's hard to stop. But anyway, that's the main thing. The most important part for me is what it does for me in my everyday life. And I went from being an angry person. My life was pretty much a mess. It was just pretty much a mess. And so I went from the anger and the defensiveness into being a person who's very calm, very peaceful, and very happy.
Well, I love those results, and that is really great. Again, for anybody who comes to the A.C.I.M for the very first time, I had Gary Renard on here, one of the most well-known teachers of A Course in Miracles in the world. Gosh, he must have been on here 5 or 6 years ago, and actually, he said this to me when I met him at a workshop in Cincinnati. I was talking to Gary, and he and I are the same age. And he said, we were talking about how it's hard to understand what the book is saying the very first time, because much of it is written like Shakespeare in iambic pentameter. And this is Gary's words. He said, I read the first few pages and I said, what the hell is this? That's what Gary said, and now, it's worth it. It's worth staying with it. Yeah, it really is. So since we're talking about A Course in Miracles, what do you as a minister have to say about what they call non-dualistic spirituality?
Well, that's one of the things I love about the Course, that there's only God. And I don't even feel like you have to use the word God if you don't want to, like everybody wakes up eventually, and there are people who are atheists who have awakened. So the spirituality is not necessary, but it appeals to me. It touches my heart, and that's why I love the Course, because it's Jesus speaking directly to us. So basically, for me, the way I think of it is there is only God, and we are in God, and that it cannot change. God created us like himself, an extension of himself, and he established us within himself. And, it's just a height of arrogance to think that we could change what God created and take ourselves out of God. And to me, that's non-duality at its core. There is nothing else. There's only God. And so,
Well, it's interesting too. When we have people who grew up in organized church, the difference between the A.C.I.M is from that of organized religion, where many organized religions literally force their beliefs on people, and they train them from children, and then they start saying, "You're a sinner, you are bad, you're going to hell if you don't do this." And I'm thinking too, many of those people, when they hear you say, "Well, this course was channeled in the voice of Jesus," and they go, "Aha, it's a religion," but it's not. It's just this beautiful, pure, non-dualistic spiritual teaching.
yeah, it is.
With that,
They call I'm sorry, I
oh,
didn't
go
mean to interrupt you. I've heard people say, Jesus wasn't a Christian. It's like that, that's very, very, very true. He wasn't. The Christianity just grew up on its own out long after Jesus was gone. So
yeah, Jesus wasn't a Christian. That's amazing. Yeah, when you think about that. Um, so, what exactly, again, for our viewers and listeners, if you can, I ask a lot of large questions. How do you explain what is the definition of non-dualistic anyway?
oh, Carl, if it's going to be non-dualistic, there can only be one. That's simply all that it is. That's why I say there's only God. There's only one. There's not God and me. There's not me and the tree. It's like everything is part of God, everything. And so that's I don't know. That's all I can say about that.
Well, that's not an easy ask. I mean, it is interesting. I'll be talking to people. Well, non-dualistic this and that, but I mean, if you think about it, we talk about the 3D world. We live in a dualistic world. There's this end of the stick and that end of the stick on every single possible thing. But really, the basis of it's an illusion of separation, which is one of the core teachings of the A.C.I.M. And so a separation from what? From our source, right?
Separation from our source, which led us to separation from each other, and separation from everything else. It's not everything that's not me. I would be separate from that. And of course, in the moment you get two of anything or anybody, you're going to immediately have conflict, and there comes suffering. And because in conflict, there's always suffering. So as the more we bring everything back into the oneness that we actually are, to the non-duality that we actually are, the less suffering that we have. And that's certainly been my experience with the course.
When I think of it in that type of terms, it's really gives me a sense of peace and comfort to know that we can go back home. But separation from everybody. These past few years with the crazy demic that's going on and all the stuff we see on the media, it's just an a emphasis of trying to keep people separated and keep things separated. And when you say that to people, well, of course, that's the way humans are. But we're, to say the classic line that I first heard Wayne Dyer say, we're a spiritual being having a physical experience. So you have to go back to that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We're not humans. We're pure spirit. But we're pure spirit having this experience because we wanted it. And of course, we're pure spirit. We're part of God. We can have anything that we want. And this is what we wanted. I'm sure when we had the idea, gosh, I'd like to be special. I'd like to be separate. I want God make me special.
Mhm.
God is like, oh, I couldn't do that to you. I love you too much.
Yeah.
So, but we wanted it. And so therefore we can have it. And I'm sure maybe when we had that first thought, we did not understand just how much suffering comes with this whole idea of being separate. You
And
can see it in the right now, like you said, in the politics and the just in gosh, it's just a mess, isn't it?
and that first thought of separation is what the Course calls a tiny mad idea. And when you think about it, that's pretty appropriately described.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also, one other thing, your website is aptly named Forgiveness is the Way Home. So let's now discuss what may be the central teaching of the Course, and that is forgiveness. How does what the Course teaches about forgiveness, how is it different from the way the world practices it?
Well, typically, that's whenever I say, let's say that I had an argument with a neighbor, and I think he mm, he did something that was very upsetting to me. Maybe he lets his dog out and they come over in my yard and poop in my yard. I don't have too many problems with my neighbors, but it's little things like that can be just as upsetting as the big things. And so I would, as a good Christian, I would be like a good Catholic. I will say, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to forgive him for that. Well, what I've done is I've made it very real. He did something wrong. He is guilty. And now I'm going to try to forgive him for being guilty. And that's never really actually worked. Of course, in miracles, it's very simple. There's nothing to forgive.
Mm.
We are innocent because God created us innocent. So all I'm doing when I forgive is I'm letting go. And that's the most simple. There's one sentence in the Course: forgiveness is letting go. And I've clung to that because it is simple. I like to keep things very simple because if A Course in Miracles isn't accessible, isn't there for me whenever I need it, well, then it's not going to be a great deal of use to me. So I can take some of the big ideas from the Course and just find a way to use them. That's very helpful. So now if my neighbor lets his dog out into my yard and I ask him, not to do that, I appreciate if you wouldn't do that because I don't like to clean up dog poop. That's why I don't own a dog. And if he does, fine. And if he doesn't, fine. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to give up my peace of mind because my neighbor doesn't do what I think he ought to do. That's my first thing. I'm not giving up my peace of mind. And my second thing is he is not guilty because he's spirit. That's only this character that he's playing in this particular incarnation is not who he is, because God did not create that. God didn't create a body because bodies die. God creates the eternal. God does not create anything flawed. God would be insane if he did those things. We're pretty insane, but he is not. God is not. So my neighbor is completely innocent. In the story, he might be doing something that is a problem. You can have the bigger things like, what if I knew somebody who was a murderer? That spirit, the spirit that's animating that body is still perfectly innocent. The character, the body that's doing this or doing that, yeah, sure, that's terrible. That's guilt. There's a lot of guilt in the ego world, in the world of duality. But in truth, in reality with a capital R, there's only what God created, and he created innocence. And so there can only be innocence. Therefore, when I say I forgive this, I'm not forgiving anything that's guilty. I'm forgiving my belief that my neighbor is guilty. I'm forgiving the belief my neighbor is guilty, and I'm letting it go. I'm just going to let it go because it's not helpful. I don't want another thing I did to like make all of this very accessible for myself is that I chose one goal. Because if you make it really simple, it's easy to do this work. I choose one goal. My goal is the peace of God. The peace of God is peace that can't be disturbed. That's my goal. Therefore, when my neighbor does something I don't like, the first thing when I ask myself, this anger that I have toward my neighbor, is that going to bring me the peace of God? It's not up, then it's not relevant. I don't want it. I'm releasing that belief to the Holy Spirit for healing, and I'm letting it go, because my peace of mind is way more important to me than having my neighbor be something he doesn't want to be.
But it is when you come from the Course's perspective about forgiveness. Well, what happened is not real. It was an illusion of separation. Nothing really happened. So different the way the world practices forgiveness. The way the world practices, you might be in court and say, "You raped me, you're bad, but I forgive you." Well, they say on the surface, they say, I forgive you, but always resonating at that lower place within their being, within their life is this: you did it, it's real, you attacked me, you hurt me, and they carry that to the grave, and that's not good. But when I have practiced true forgiveness, as the A.C.I.M teaches it, it does bring a sense of peace to your life, and I'd have to say, in my 20 years of studying the A.C.I.M, that's the biggest benefit that I have received from just studying is a sense of peace.
Absolutely. I have like 3 questions that I use for myself. And my first question is, am I at peace? Because if I'm not at peace and I've gotten off my path, I need to look at my thoughts. It's only thoughts. Everything comes from a thought. Nothing happens without a thought coming first. So I look at my thoughts. What have I been thinking? Have I been upset with somebody? Have I been, I don't know, anything that's going on that's not bringing me peace? I want to see it. Because if I'm not aware of it, then I can't let it go, can I? So that's the first thing. And the second thing I ask myself is, who am I? Because if I think that I'm this body, this human being, this person, this personality, if I think that's what I am, then that's what I'm going to act like, and that's where I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay in that place of that lower existence of thinking that I'm a body, and I'll do what bodies do, and I'll feel like bodies feel. Somewhere in the Course, Jesus says, if you believe you're a body, then you'll suffer everything the body suffers. So that implies that we don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've noticed, is that if I keep my mind clear, I forgive my beliefs that are causing my distress, then I don't suffer. So that is very important. It's all about, what are we identifying with? Am I going to identify as a human being, or am I going to identify as spirit only, pure spirit? And then the third thing I ask myself is, what is my purpose? Is it my purpose to make sure my neighbor keeps his dog in his yard? Or is it my purpose to wake up from this dream? So if I know when, if I'm not at peace, I know it's time to look and see what's going on. If I remember who I am and I remember why I'm here. These life stories, the reason we are here, these life stories are very helpful, in that the Holy Spirit will use them to help you wake up. We use them when we get here. It's like we come here to have this experience, to be separate, to be special, whatever, to live out the tiny mad idea. But if we're ready to wake up, well, then the Holy Spirit will use that story to help us. So the very things that are very human, and the way that we deal with other people, getting angry, feeling depressed, being jealous, whatever it is, feeling like a victim, big time victimhood, for many of us. If that's what I think it's for, then that's what I'll be, and I'll suffer for it. But if I'm ready to remember my purpose, which is to use that story to forgive the idea of victimhood, of jealousy, of anger, whatever it is that happens to be coming up.
And victimhood is such a pervasive feeling amongst the vast majority of the people of the world. It's not my fault. They did it. That government is bad. They did this. And they just continue to play the victimhood, and everything's energies all alike. So they just bring in more reason to be a victim. So by staying in that realm. Another amazing topic that of A Course in Miracles is the topic of atonement. What is atonement according to the Course?
Well, there's more than one definition for it, but I guess basically the atonement is God's plan for our awakening. So it's our way out. And so if we accept God's plan, like for instance, the ego's plan, the split mind, the separate self, its plan is to be right, to win, to find something, to grasp onto something that makes life feel worthwhile, and then to get through life as best as we can. But if instead we want to use God's plan to help us wake up from the story and to return ultimately to return our full mind to our awareness of where we actually are, which is in God. Well, then there's a plan, and part of that plan is He placed the Holy Spirit in our mind so that we would always have His voice right there, helping us. When I want to forgive somebody, I'm having trouble forgiving. This idea is really never forgiving anybody, just forgiving my thoughts about them. But when I'm trying to forgive, and if I'm having trouble, I can say, okay, Holy Spirit, I need your help. I can't think of another way to see this. Help me to see it differently. And then the thoughts, a thought, an idea, or maybe I'll read something or whatever, something will come into my mind that helps me to see it differently. So that's accepting the atonement. Let me accept the atonement for this. And He tells us that's our only function. Enlighten yourself. That's our function. Accept the enlightenment for yourself. Because we're all connected, because we're all part of each other. And there's this one mind from which we act and react. When Jesus ascended, He did that for all of us. So we're all awake anyway. But if we don't accept that we're awake, then we continue to have this experience, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, until you can't stand the suffering anymore. So that would be accepting the atonement. I accept that I'm mistaken, and I accept that the Holy Spirit has the answer.
I think when you first start reading the Course for the first time, and it explains that atonement is the undoing of everything you ever learned, and you're going, what? But it's the way home. And why not at least get started? Take the first baby steps in trying to learn that and understand that. That was a beautiful explanation. We are speaking to Reverend Myron Jones. She is a certified minister with Pathways of Light, which teaches A Course in the Miracles. So, real quickly, I don't know, did you want to talk a little bit more about Pathways of Light? That was what led you to your path that you're on now.
Yeah, I love Pathways of Light. It was founded by Robert and Mary Stolting, and Mary has this wonderful, and they both do, but Mary has this wonderful connection with Spirit, and they have these courses that I took with them, and they do have the ministerial courses, but they also have other courses based on, generally, they have 24 of them, and they're all based on different facets of the Course. Like there's one on forgiveness, and one on relationships, and one on choosing peace, another one on gratitude, that kind of thing, one on cause and effect. So they have all those, and so that's been extremely helpful. Jesus says that the only way that we can have something is to give it. And if we're not willing to give it, then we can't have it. So we need to be willing to give to everyone without exception. And that's one of the things that I've learned through taking these courses. And because when I do them with someone else. That's the way I work with someone, is through these courses. I do them with someone else. And so I'm giving what I want to receive. We read the pamphlet, the little booklet. We read the booklet. It says to go to the Course in Miracles and read on Manual for Teachers, number 19, the first 5 paragraphs. So we read it together, we discuss it. We talk about how we're using it in our life. We're talking about what's hard about using it, perhaps that could come up. And then it gives us other things to do, listening to meditations, and then we share with each other what we gained from it. We meet once a week and share. So this is the kind of thing that I do, and sometimes in groups. Sometimes I have groups of people who do it together. But the important part is that we're joining. Our problem is we think we're separate. The solution is to join. And this has just been such an excellent way to join. All of it comes through Spirit to Mary, all these courses. I asked her one time, I was writing an article, and I was trying to find a quote, and this is before you had search engines online, so I was trying to find a quote in the course, and I couldn't find it. So I called Mary and asked her where it was. She says, I don't know. I said, how can you not know? It's like all through these booklets, she's got these perfect quotes that go with each thing she's talking about. She says, I just ask Spirit, and he tells me where to go. So they're beautifully put together. I do those with other people. I do it all day long. I'm retired now, so I have plenty of time. So now I only work 7 days a week. I work with people all day long, every day, all week long. And some of them I'm doing the ministerial courses with. I'm helping them go through their courses, facilitating it with them. And so that's all that Pathways does. Now they have a lot of free stuff that they do on their website. Plus they got courses you can buy. They have an excellent course on learning to hear the Holy Spirit, which is free. If you want to do the e-course, or if you want the printed, it's like $20 or something like that. I don't remember, but lots of good stuff on there.
Well, I think if somebody does come to a Pathways of Light, don't feel you have to become a minister. Just learn about the A.C.I.M and practice it and put it in life. So I'm just curious. I think you might have said this earlier. How you had heard about A Course in Miracles from that first person you went to hear talk about it, and you went and bought the book. It didn't just like appear in your life, right?
Right. Actually, I got it. My mom got it at the same time. So my mom and I studied it together. And then my sister-in-law joined us, and then my other sister-in-law joined us. And so there were 4 of us studying it together. And that was when we were all living in the same place, and we kind of scattered. But yeah, so, and then when I bought it, it was like in 3 books.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The text, the workbook, and the manual.
For teachers, yeah.
So you're also the author of your own book called Hey, Holy Spirit, It's Me Again. Can you tell us about this book and why you wrote it?
Yeah, that was kind of funny too. One of the things that I learned to do, it was when I'm doing the lessons, I would read the lesson, then I would write what I thought it meant, what I was getting from it. And then I would ask Holy Spirit what he wanted me to know about it. And then I would start writing just whatever came into my mind. And I did that with all the lessons, and I would share it everywhere. I share everything. I overshare quite a lot. But I was sharing it with somebody, and his name was Tomas. And it was, I think, Yahoo, maybe back when Yahoo did a lot of stuff. Anyway, it was like a Yahoo group or something. And Tomas said, and Tomas, he and his partner, spiritual partner, Nook, they had a book that was well known in the course community. Don't ask me the name of it, I kind of forget right now. But anyway, so he said, you need to put these together and get it published. And I said, yeah, I kind of thought about that. And he says, well, no, you need to do it though. And he basically nagged me into actually doing it, but he spoke to his publisher and said, I think you should look at her book. And so I sent him a couple of chapters and he said, yeah, absolutely, we want it. And so then I actually had to do it. So it's not that I didn't want it out there. It's just it's a big job to do stuff like that. So it's the first 90 lessons. And the reason it wound up being the first 90 lessons is that the publisher said, this is how many words you can use. And so that's how it was the first 90 lessons. But it was a long time ago. I did it, like I think in 2012 is whenever I did that. And probably I've changed. Certainly I have changed. Maybe it would be a different book today. But it nevertheless is an excellent book, I think. I'm not bragging on myself. It's just that this is what Spirit gave me, and it was helpful. And I have people who bought it way back then, and they still go back and reread it.
Great. I've got a couple books out myself, and it's kind of interesting. Gary Renard talks about when his very first book came out, The Disappearance of the Universe. Very long. I think it's 400 pages or something like that. And when he submitted it to publishers, they all said, well, it's too long. We got to break this up to two. And he goes, no, you don't understand. This has to be published as one, until he found that small publishing house, Fearless Books, with D. Patrick Miller, and that story's since become famous. But yeah, those publishers, this is what the public wants, But at least you got the book out, and that's beautiful. Hopefully I can grab a copy.
That was a book that was like, I mean, if that's the reason Gary came, was to get that book out there. That introduced so many people to the course, and equally importantly, it brought so many people back to the course. People who had started it and then kind of let it go. It brought them back to the course. So it's been a significant book.
And actually, I recommend Gary's book, The Disappearance of the Universe. Is if you haven't started the A.C.I.M, or if you're having trouble understanding it, read his book first, because it's a very practical explanation of many things in there. And it really is a fantastic book. Now, I think Gary's got 3 books out. He's been working on he's got 4 books out. He's got another one for a long time he's working on. So, well, you've got that book. I have this question. Many of my guests speak about mankind being on the cusp of a very real ascension process into the higher realms of light and love. Is this part of our atonement and forgiveness process?
I don't know. I don't know, Carl. I mean, a lot of people talk about it. I think that Jesus told Helen whenever he brought it through, he was in her notes. He said that it wasn't supposed to come yet, but that we were going in the wrong direction. We had to have some help. It was a celestial speed up, because we needed this, and God knows we do need something. And this has been, I mean, like, I don't think that A Course in Miracles is the only thing that one can study. But if it's for you, it's for you. And it definitely speaks to me, and it speaks to many other people. But it is a wonderful guide that will get you right to awakening, if that's what if you decide to do that. If you decide to take it all the way, it'll get you right to awakening. And there are people who have awakened through A Course in Miracles. Kate Greaves is one of them. She did that just a few years ago. She used A Course in Miracles alone, just A Course in Miracles, and she awakened. If you haven't ever had her on, you may very much enjoy her.
Yeah, I have to look into that. That would be great.
Yeah, she's amazing to me. I really love Kate, because she started out just like me. Her life was a mess too. you know, and do A Course in Miracles and her determination to do this. She spent 5 years. Am I saying that right? I'm not good about details, but I'm thinking it was 5 years that she spent just dedicated to the Course, and then she awakened.
You know, that's interesting. I'm glad you brought up celestial speed up. It seems to me, A Course in Miracles very succinctly states that it's about saving time on your path to awakening to the truth of all that is. And it even says that you could save 1,000 lifetimes and not realize it, just simply because you've chosen this lifetime to wake up and go back home to source.
Yes, well, you can save 1,000 lifetimes just by doing your forgiveness, even if you didn't wake up, just by doing your forgiveness. If I keep, you know, like I said, everything begins with a thought, and those thoughts are based on beliefs. And so if I keep forgiving these beliefs, like I forgive the belief in death, I forgive the belief in victimhood. And victimhood was a huge story for me. Like, my whole life was just a victim, victim, victim story, which is perfect. If for somebody who came here for the specific purpose of giving up the belief in victimhood, well, then that's the only way to do it, is to feel like a victim. How can you say I forgive victimhood if you've never felt like a victim? So it's perfect setup, you know, for that purpose. And whenever and here's another thing, Carl. It's like, I'm not doing this for Myron. Myron doesn't even exist. Myron is a character, a dream character. Okay. But I'm doing it. But in this process of experiencing myself as Myron, I experience myself as a victim. I recognize that this is pretty awful. Eventually start to realize, I don't think I realized it until I found out that you didn't have to be a victim. And then suddenly I'm like, whoa, you know, I could see it everywhere in my life, what a victim I thought I was. And so I started forgiving that belief. I forgive the belief in victimhood. God didn't create victimhood. It can't exist. I must have made that up. It must have been part of that whole crazy, mad idea of separation. And so I started giving up that belief in victimhood. And I would do it with every situation that came into my mind. Until I can't imagine I'm a victim. In fact, one thing I say all the time to anybody who'll listen, you think it's about this other person? No, it's about you. It's about me.
Oh, yeah.
It's always about me. I turn it around every time I'm mad at somebody. About me. What is it in me that needs to be healed? But when I do that work and I heal something like that, it lifts everybody up, because we are all connected. We are all part of the same mind. So it's like when the water rises, all the ships rise with it. Every time someone wakes up, there's so much light in the mind. Anybody who is right there on the cusp of doing it themselves, maybe that'll just tip them right over. And the person who awakened, or the person who did the forgiveness work, they don't know all that's happening. And it doesn't matter. Jesus says it doesn't matter where in the mind something is healed. It's healed for all.
You mentioned earlier the woman, Kate, was that her name, who spent 5 years? What's her last name again?
Grieves, like you're grieving.
Oh, okay.
And it's C-A-T-E. She lives in Australia. I think she's visiting in Canada right now, but she's from Australia. And you can find her on YouTube and see the kind of stuff.
And you mentioned that she had spent 5 years dedicated to only studying the Course. Now, I'm sure you know David Hoffmeister. I had him on this show way back when I first started, 2018. He was one of my very first guests, and I actually ended up being able to go to his mom's house where he is visiting in Cincinnati, because it's not far from where I live, and got to hang out with David. Just an amazing man. But David, in our interview, told me that when he first started, he dedicated himself. He was living in his car, basically, that had 2 cylinders, driving around Kentucky and Southern Ohio and West Virginia and doing the A.C.I.M. But he said, in his own words, he went down the rabbit hole and he completely had these amazing enlightening moments and awakening moments, because that was all he did. And the Holy Spirit responded.
Yes. Yes. I don't doubt that for a second. The Holy Spirit always responds. We're the ones who put on the brakes and say, okay, well, that's enough. I've been happy enough. I'm going to go back to being miserable. And then we have to do it again. And Kate, I don't think Kate didn't, she didn't quit a job or anything like that. You know, she lived her life. But like for me, A Course in Miracles is not something I do in my spare time. It's what I live all the time.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that's what that is when you really start to see these wonderful shifts. In 2019, I had like this very significant shift. I mean, we can have all kinds of little shifts as we go along, you know, because we're awakening all the time. And but I had a very significant one in 2019, and some people have asked me, well, what did you do? How did you make that happen? I don't know. I just kept forgiving. And then one day things were different, and I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't get it. But I was going to a workshop in Portland, Oregon, and I was going there to watch Regina Dawn Akers. And I was like sharing a room with her. I had the craziest trip. If anything could have gone wrong, it went wrong. And it was just, I'm not even gonna go into all that, but it was just crazy. And the whole time it's happening, I'm having a ball. I am like, this is so interesting, you know, and it was like that for the whole trip. The day before, I was sitting in a parking lot crying my eyes out because I remembered something happened in the past that I regretted. And I was just like feeling all this guilt. The next day, it's all gone. And so when I got there, Regina asked me how I was doing. And I was just telling her about the crazy trip. And I was just happy as a lark. And she says, oh, she says, you've reached fundamental well-being. And I said, okay, I don't know what she's talking about. And so in the workshop that she was doing, there was a woman there who I noticed because she was so quiet. She looked so peaceful. And she came up to me. I've never met her before. I didn't speak to her after this either. But she came up to me and she gave me some papers. And she said, I think you might find this helpful. And it was, there's a guy named Jeffrey Martin who did a lot of research on people who are awakened. And it was about that. It was about all the different stages. And so she recognized it in me. And nobody had said anything. I never said anything about it. Regina never said it in front of anybody, but she just recognized that it was that much of a difference. And so for a while, I was like on this super high, this spiritual high, you know, and then that kind of wears off. And it's kind of like, this is just the new normal. But I have not awakened to letting go of this self completely. Mm-hmm. That I would consider to be truly awakening.
Well, you know,
let go of the self.
The one thing that I found interesting with myself is practicing forgiveness and non-judgment. It's not like I don't have judgmental thoughts anymore, but I don't honor them or latch onto them, you know, and I know my listeners have heard me explain it this way before, but it's like sitting at a railroad crossing and the train is going by, that Doppler effect. You can hear the train going like that. And that judgmental thought, and that guy's a real jerk, and he just, and I go, thank you for showing up, but I'm not interested. Just keep going. And, you know, and there are times where I do get judgmental thoughts, and I hang on to it, and I hang on to it, and I finally realize, well, why do I feel so crummy? Oh, yeah. And it's something, I think, if you can practice it that way, you're going to notice a sense of peace in your life like you haven't had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great forgiveness process, actually. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. he tells us, all through the course, as he even did in the Bible, is don't judge. You can't judge. You don't know enough to judge. You do not have enough information to be judging. So what happens when something you need judgment? Well, ask the Holy Spirit to judge for you. And then you just receive a judgment. You just receive whatever it is you need in that moment. So there's no reason for us to judge anything or anybody. But yes, when you do judge, it's painful. It's suffering. Judgment is suffering.
Well,
I got tired of suffering,
Oh, yeah. Well, we've been speaking with the amazing Reverend Myron Jones, an ordained minister with the Pathways of Light for A Course in Miracles. This is just a phenomenal discussion. I feel like the Holy Spirit sent you here to talk, which is probably true. You're his emissary today. But thank you again, Myron, for putting up with me. I got a little rough throat here today, and we managed to get through that. But what is your website? How can people connect with you?
Well, I do have a website. Is forgivenessisthewayhome.org. All small letters. Forgivenessisthewayhome.org. I'm on Facebook, all over Facebook. I have 3 or 4 groups on Facebook. Those studying the text, the manual for teachers, the workbook. I have 3 different groups for that. I'm also on YouTube. I have a lot of videos on YouTube. In fact, I record something at least 4 times a week. And then all the lessons are on there. I've recorded them in the past. So yeah, I'm out there.
All right. I've been watching some of your videos too, but yeah, it would be great. Just go to forgiveness. It was Forgiveness
Is the Way Home.
Myron, thank you so much. It's been a beautiful conversation. What you are doing is truly the work of God. It really is. And thank you for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Carl. It was great meeting you and talking to you too.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.